Thanks so much for joining us for an American Ambulance Association webinar. Please accept our apologies for the little bit of a glitch we experienced and the delay in getting started. We're so happy that we were able to resolve those technical issues. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Andrea Abbas, who will be presenting today. To ask Andrea questions, please use the Q&A function represented by the square at the bottom of your screen with a question mark inside it. The chat function will be reserved for any questions that you have about technology or access to the recording. Speaking of the recording, it will be distributed in tomorrow's American Ambulance Association Digest email. We will also include it in an email to you that goes out by the end of the day tomorrow that will feature both the recording and the slides that Andrea kindly provided in advance. With that, it is my pleasure to turn things over to her so she can talk to you about her journey from recruiter to recruited.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you to the American Ambulance Association and Women in Emergency Services for putting this program together and giving me the opportunity to share this important information with you today. So a little bit about me and why I chose to create this presentation. I'm currently in a EMS operations supervisor role. I've recently transitioned from the Michigan State Office of Rural Health. So things have changed since my bio, but I last year went through multiple recruitment and retention activities, both on both ends of the spectrum as the recruiter and being recruited. And being recruited was new to me. I had been in my role for 6 years, and I hadn't really been out there in quite a while. And so it reminded me of some of the small things and some of the big things that are really important when we recruit folks. So I am a consultant. I do own the EMS Professional LLC. So if you ever need anything, you can reach out to me with questions. And again, I am working currently as an operations supervisor here in Michigan, overseeing a operation in Livingston County. So with that, this is what you're going to get out of today's program. I won't read the objectives to you, but I wanted to just quickly put them up for you to understand what we're going to be talking about. Again, this webinar is about my experiences in the recruitment end of things, and we'll end with a little bit of talk about retention. So with that, I was in my role at the state office again for 6 years, and I realized I needed to get back into an ambulance service for many reasons, one of which I really enjoy being out there taking care of people. But I also felt like there was a disconnect starting to happen where when you're not in the field or in the agency every day, you start to lose sight of the understanding behind how technology is changing and how things are run day to day. Things are changing at a rapid pace when it comes to workforce, when it comes to technology, when it comes to all of the things that are related to operations. So it's really important to have your hand on those things. And I felt like it was going to make me better in my role. So I started my job search. And one of the things that was unique about me is I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I have a deep understanding of many of the agencies because in my last role and prior roles, I work closely with these agencies. So I know the history, I know a lot of the leaders, I know, the area to which they cover, types of ambulances they use. I have an idea of clinical quality, et cetera. So I was walking into the job market somewhat biased, but with an open mind as well. And as I started to have conversations with folks, one of the things that came up for me was it is all about who you know and what you know, right? So for me, I knew where I would work and where I just wouldn't. I had a list of folks that I knew and I understood their standards, expectations, their reputation within the community. I did also uncover some agencies that maybe I hadn't interacted with that I became curious about and was able to vet through conversations and interviews. And then I had those agencies where I knew I wouldn't work there based on, again, reputation, leadership, operational constructs, etc. So a little bit of bias with an open mind. And one of the things that was really highlighted is it's really good to know who your candidates are, but also that the candidate knows who you are. They have a good idea of your image, your expectations, etc. So I asked myself, who would I hire if this were reversed and I could choose my ambulance service that's going to come to my house during an emergency? Who would I hire? Well, how did I decide that? So we understand currently right now, almost everybody is hiring. If you're full staffed, I would shake your hand and say congratulations. But in healthcare today, it's really challenging to staff. Many people are working from home, things have changed, the landscape of work has changed, and so many of us are just running short, regardless of our level of quality, benefit package, pay, etc. So how did I begin? Well, I started with the relationships. And one of the things that I find is important to me, and when you read about Gen Zers, millennials, etc., one of the things that's important to the up and coming generation is who you are as a person. So I thought about, okay, I know so and so, I know who they are as a person. Does their moral compass align with my moral compass? Do their value systems align with my value systems? So if I know the CEO of ABC Ambulance, I understand who that person is, and I understand as a leader, their values and their thoughts and beliefs are going to trickle down into that organization. So this became one of the things that I thought about when I thought about filling out an application, or let's be frank, making a phone call. And then the other thing that I thought about was reputation. So again, when you spend time in the same area within the same state, you understand who has a great reputation, you understand who doesn't. You may also uncover some misconceptions about maybe what you were told if you're curious. So staying curious, but understanding that reputation. And we're going to talk a little bit about word on the street, right? And then integrity. When you know someone and you know the operation, one of the things that I talk about all the time, and those that work with me now understand this, is integrity is everything. You have to be honest about who you are from the beginning when you're vetting a candidate, right? And you have to be honest about who you are as you move through this industry. And once you violate integrity, people talk, people understand who you are, and they start to maybe shy away from working at your operation, because then that degrades away trust. And in this field, in the work we do, we have to have a high level of trust, because the work is high risk, it's dangerous, and it's really important. It's service-based work. So those are the questions I asked myself. So I started with a list of folks, some of which I just picked up the phone and said, hey, I want to get back out there. How do you feel if I were to join your agency part-time? And had some really great phone conversations. I was able to call some of the others within the agency because, again, relationships, ask them how things were going. You know, would you work here? Are you happy? Those types of things. And I was able to gather some information that way. Now, I'm a unique case. So if we're recruiting folks that maybe this is their first time within the field and they don't know a lot of people, that could be a different animal. However, most folks know someone within your organization, right? That is often the story we hear. Oh, Nick told me about his job as an EMT, and now I want to work here as an EMT. That is a common story. So whatever Nick is selling and selling about your organization, whatever Nick is saying about your organization is coming to this candidate, thus their interest or lack thereof. So, well, when we're trying to attract employees, what do they want, right? So I had to ask myself that. And I think it depends on what stage of your career you're in. Your wants might be a little bit different, but at the basis, we all want the same things. So Gallup Workforce is a great resource for this. They did a poll, and what they came up with is most folks want the ability to do the best work they can do. They want a great work-life balance, and they also want personal well-being. I think this is probably one of our greatest areas of struggle, just considering the nature of our work. Regardless of whether you're a clinical provider or an administrator, this is extremely demanding. This field itself is very demanding. So we have a lot of work to do in this space. Those that create good work-life balance and well-being will attract talent. Greater stability and job security. Are you coming to work feeling safe? Do you know you have a job tomorrow? Are you being paid well? And people are now realizing when they move to a new position, they are likely to get a significant increase versus staying in the same position. This is a change in the workforce. In prior years, this was very different. People would get into roles and they would stay there for very long periods of time. The increase in income was usually much more significant than it is now year over year. And so folks are realizing they need to transition into a new role to actually increase the income level to what they want it to be. So they're looking for that increase in income and the opportunity to work for a company with a great brand and reputation. Again, word on the street. You know, when I walk in the morning, do I feel proud? When I go home at night and I talk about my agency, am I proud of the work I'm doing? When we represent ourselves on the internet or on social media, am I proud of that? Do I want to share that? Do I want to stand behind that message? These things are important to employees. And that really comes back to leadership. So when we think about who we're hiring, this is one of my favorite studies to share. And if you've seen some of my prior lectures on different topics, I tend to bring this into play because not only does it resonate with me, but it's really important that we understand who we're hiring. So this is a peer-reviewed study. And by the way, I put clickable links in the presentation, so you can actually go read these studies that I'm sharing with you. So this is peer reviewed, and it basically polled different first responders on their personality traits. And what they found is that we need to be in control. We are obsessive. We are compulsive, which those words are very strong, but what it means can be on a varying level, right? For us, maybe obsessive means for one person, hey, I have a hard time not focusing on something. I've got to get it right, or I've got to take care of it. And these are all good traits to have in a medical emergency. Highly motivated by internal factors, basically meaning we have a very strong value system. We're action oriented. We like to do things. We like to get things done. High need for stimulation, easily bored, risk takers, rescue personality, highly dedicated, and a strong demand to be needed. So when we look at these personality traits that were uncovered through the research, we start to think, wow, this really does fit the role. Now, going back to recruitment, and when you're trying to recruit someone with many of these personality traits, how do you do that? How do you cater a role to this personality, right? So it's really important to take that into consideration, not only in recruitment, but how you set up the workday is going to be really important here. So how do you find the best employer? Well, I was asking myself that. How do I find the best person for me? What's the best value proposition? So for me, at my stage in life, time is really scarce for me. So if I'm going to pick up a shift, speaking in my previous life, right, and I'm going to spend a Saturday working in the ambulance, I want to be paid well for my time. I also understand that I bring a wealth of knowledge to the table. I've got 20 plus years of experience. I could do project work for this agency. I'm a project manager. I can manage multiple things. I've built field training programs. I could contribute in that way. There's a lot of things I have to add. So I want to be paid well. So when I'm coming in at your pay scale, the bottom tier of your pay scale is not going to work for me. So one of the things that I found at some of the municipal agencies is it was a no if, ands, or buts kind of contractual obligation that you come in at tier one. You're just going to get bottom pay. That was hard for someone like me to rectify. So that eliminated some of the municipal agencies right off the bat. As much as there was one local that I really enjoyed and they really wanted me to come on board, but that base pay was so low, it just didn't make sense to me at all. The other thing that is important to myself and many of the candidates that we're recruiting is benefits. What are your benefits? Oftentimes people put things on their outline like competitive 401k. Well, what does that mean? To one person, a competitive 401k would be a 3% match. To another, it would be a 5% match. Well, what if you're offering, a 10 plus match? What if you are a multiplier? And the candidate doesn't even know about that. That would be a miss on behalf of the agency. So not only being transparent with pay and benefits, but openly sharing what those benefits are. Do you have a wellness program? Do you reimburse for education? Having these things available up front is important. I do understand the competitive landscape, and I understand oftentimes agencies don't want to share their exact pay range because they're in a competitive market. But today, folks expect to know those things going in right away. What is the pay? I don't want to waste your time having a conversation if the pay isn't where I need it to be. So pay and benefits, there's no debating that. If you can, stay as competitive as you can within the market. Try to outcompete those rates of pay, because folks are going to be looking at that first before they start investing in you and getting committed. And then leadership, they're going to want to know who leads them. Many people are very curious. They often won't vocalize that or ask, but they will pay attention. So one of the things I've done throughout my career as I've grown up is wherever I'm working, especially when I was in some of the clinical roles I was in and lower tier management roles, oftentimes I didn't get to spend any time with the CEO or vice president or however you're structured, right? Director. And so what I would do is if I was at the main station or I ran out of the main station, I would go to the CEO's office and introduce myself. And I would make a point of kind of just looking around their office and getting to know them. I wanted to know who I was working for, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about their value system. Because if I understand that, I understand whether I'm going to mesh well there. My intention in working in an agency always is to progress. Not everybody thinks that way. Some folks just want to come in and do their work and go home. But for me, it was progression. So if I'm going to progress, I have to understand who the leadership is. Leadership, extremely important. We have to lead well. We have to manage well. And we have to align with the people we hire. So this leadership section that I put in here, I wanted to briefly mention when we hire people, we need to look for a value mismatch or alignment. A bad hire is really going to create some tension within your agency. And it's really hard to screen people in an interview or two, right? Everybody puts their best foot forward. You don't really know what you're going to get until they get inside. So we need to kind of uncover potentially how these folks function when it comes to their value systems in the interview. Because if it is a mismatch, it's going to create tension when they come inside the agency and start working. And then signs of respect and work balance. So things I looked for, do you do inter-facility transports at night? Do you keep your trucks up all night? If you're running 24-hour operation, where is the boundary? Do you have a fatigue policy? And I understand those things can get complicated, but that's one sign of respect that I look for. Other signs of respect are, how does supervision operate? How does management operate? What is your policy on investigating issues? What is your policy on, having fair workplace practices? Is there nepotism or is there a policy on nepotism within the agency? Just those little things that you see that you think, okay, this is really important. We want to be sure that this is a fair work environment, that there's work balance. Asking about call volume, I think is important, but oftentimes you might not get a full picture of what that means, right? Because you have to take into account transport times and whether you're a dynamic system or not. So there's some things there that can be hard to uncover. But I oftentimes would straight up ask, do your 24-hour trucks sleep? How do you make sure they sleep? And if you get an answer like, well, no, they're busy, they're probably up all night, that's fair. Or people might hesitate to say, well, sure, they sleep, but I don't really know how to measure that or tell you how that happens. They may not be sleeping, and this may be something that's not addressed. And then word on the street. What are people saying? You get curious. Maybe you see the rate of pay, you start to have the conversation, you're interested, but maybe you don't know a lot about the agency. So you want to know what the word on the street is. So you ask people that have been around the way, you ask friends and colleagues, and you get a outside perspective from somebody that's maybe not inside or maybe inside, but you get differing perspectives. And that word on the street is so important. And this really goes back to hiring right? Because if we get the right people inside, we don't turn them over as quickly. They don't become angry and disgruntled and leave and then tell all their friends. We're hiring the right people from the get-go. And so your turnover rate isn't as high, and you don't have people coming in that don't mesh. Because anytime you're in a relationship and it doesn't work, you're going to create tension and there's going to be negative feelings. That's just part of the game, right? And then opportunities for growth. So, can I go in ABC ambulance and grow? Is there potential for me to move into different roles? Is there potential for me to earn more? Do I get a pay raise if I get into the FTO program? Do I get a pay raise if I become a flight certified paramedic? Um, how am I rewarded and how do I increase my level of pay? And am I going to learn? So, two things that I always say to myself is the best positions are where you're earning and you're learning. You can have one or the other. When you don't have both, it's time to move on. So, that was something I was really looking at when I was looking for the best employer. So, what happened during the application process? Okay, so we had our conversations, we made our phone calls. We're going through the process of saying, you know what? I have to submit an application. I'm going to apply to ABC Ambulance. Well, the advertisements are the first thing I'm looking at, right? And sometimes you need to look at them, sometimes you don't, depending on who you know, but it's important. And the reason it's important is when you read a job role, the way that they convey that job role is really important, right? So language usage. So things like the incumbent, very impersonalized. If they talk about their expectations in a really clear manner, and you can read the job description and understand, oh, I will be doing this, I won't be doing that. Green flag, they talk about leadership and the importance of leadership in the role, right? Regardless of where you're at in the organization, that's a green flag. That's great. So looking at, do they clearly define the role? Do they use language that's appealing to you, that again aligns with you and your value system? Are they transparent with pay and benefits? And then the next step before you submit the application is, do you look at social media? So one of the first things that I did if I didn't know the agency is I would go look at social media. Those that I already knew, I had an understanding of what their social media was like. And here are things I pay attention to. Are people clean? So are they dressed well, clean cut? Are their shirts tucked in? Are their boots tied? Those things are really important to me. So I look at those on social media. When you take pictures, are the pictures good pictures? People aren't like standing misaligned, their eyes closed, just bad pictures and you're posting them. You don't want to do that. When people are out at a picnic and you take a picture to post to social, do you include all the food everywhere and messiness everywhere? That to me shows a lack of attention to detail. So I'm very particular and I pick up on a vibe on social media. Now, does everybody pay attention to that stuff? Probably not. But for me, I'm looking for a high quality organization that pays attention to detail because that's what aligns with my value system. So I'm looking at your social media. I'm also paying attention to the messaging. I was watching it wasn't TikTok, I think it was an Instagram video where they had an employee who was they did like a quick dance. It was a quick dance in front of an ambulance. I didn't really get the whole thing, but they didn't have a belt on. They had a t-shirt on, which is fine, but they looked messy and they kept repeating something. And it was, I think they were saying something. They may have been singing a song. I don't quite remember the details, but I remember thinking there's no way I'm working there. And they kept saying it's fun to work here. It's fun to work here. It's fun. And they were being silly. And a couple things stood out to me. That's not my environment. It struck me as a very maybe immature environment. Maybe they're, looking for folks that are much younger. I didn't see that aspect of professionalism that I was looking for. And so I was immediately turned off, right? Someone else might look at that video at a different stage with different values and expectations and love it and go work there and be happy. But for me, I saw that and I knew, okay, this is not an agency that I would want to work for. And the same thing goes for the website. When you look at the website, is there good information on the website? Is it organized? Is it easy to navigate? If I'm looking for an application portal, can I find it? Those things I looked for as well. And then sign-on bonuses. So everybody has a mixed feeling about this. And I understand, again, if you're in a competitive market, if every neighbor is doing a sign-on bonus, fine. However, I am a really big believer in retention bonuses. So if I see a sign-on bonus, I'm less likely to be interested. If I see a retention bonus, I'm more likely to be interested. Again, it's my value system, right? Someone else out there that it has a different mindset and maybe, they have different motivations, they would love that and they will come on board. And that's what the organization is looking for. So when I'm job searching, part of my experience was looking at these things and adding folks to the list or removing them based on these different types of criteria within the job advertisement. Excuse me, I need to grab some water. So, what were the barriers and turnoffs? Well, the application itself, right? So, any of you that have filled out an application recently, it can be very frustrating. And again, I was out of the game for a long time. I had forgotten how time consuming applications can be. So, what I discovered is if the application was just cumbersome, where I would go into the portal and I had to manually enter every single thing, then it asked me to upload my resume, or maybe I go into the portal and it autofills and everything's wrong and you just have to erase it again. That's not good. Now, how critical am I going to be? Well, if I know it's a good company and I know I'm getting something great, I may go ahead and just, continue on. However, if I'm really not sure about the company and I'm just putting my name in the hat to see if I can have a brief conversation with them, I may abandon the application. If it's going to take me 3 hours to complete an application, I'm probably not doing it. The younger generations expect this, and they expect us to respect their time. And I feel the same way. So the applications that I got in, the portals that I got into, where it was very brief and it said upload your resume and we will contact you, and maybe there was just a little bit of information or a brief question. Awesome. Love that, because on the back end, if you need to meet those HR expectations, you can do that once you garner interest with the employee and start bringing them in. All of that doesn't necessarily need to be done up front. And I find that many people are really adverse to spending hours on an application only to find out they never get a phone call, or, it's not a good fit, or whatever it may be. It's a lot of time invested. So please, if you haven't looked at your application process in a while, go back and take a peek and see if you can revamp it to make it really efficient, to make it mobile friendly. So if folks are pulling it up on their phone, they can apply through their phone quite easily. Again, technology and the way it is today, we don't want this to be clunky. It says something about the organization, and you may be losing good candidates based off of their experience in the application portal. I do have to say something about certification uploads. I understand why we need to upload those certifications, but again, do you need to have all of them at the very beginning? Do we need to upload our, driver safety cert and every single cert we have? You're going to vet that candidate regardless. And you can get those items from them later. Maybe a simple verification of the license is all you need to get started, and then you can verify the rest later. So asking for all of this up front, probably a little bit too much for today's candidates. And honestly, for me, as busy as I was, I was spending a couple hours on the weekend throwing in my name to agencies I enjoyed, and I really didn't enjoy spending 3 hours on an application. And then inappropriate, outdated requests. So I did fill out a few applications, and I let this go, but I did leave these things blank. No, you don't need to know my age. No, you don't need to know what I made in my previous role. Those are things that I'm not sharing. References, I'll probably fill out the references, but again, we have to keep in mind that when people put references, these are typically their friends and people that are going to be biased anyway, right? And sure, they might know the right people, but I just am not a fan of doing that, especially up front, right? You don't know that you want to hire them yet. Do we need this at stage one when you're just getting the conversation started? So looking at barriers and turnoffs, I did abandon a few applications, either based off of the fact that the portal just wasn't working well, or it was so time intensive, it just wasn't worth it. So, according to a survey, 60% of job seekers quit filling out their online application due to length and complexity, right? So, there's research behind this. People just are not willing to dedicate that much time to an application. So, effective strategies to reduce the drop-off rate. So I've already mentioned some of these, but this is from LinkedIn HR Management. Again, you can read the full article down below. I have a clickable link for you. So simplify the process. We talked about that. Communicate frequently and transparently. So as soon as someone drops in the portal, you want to be staffed in a way that someone's reviewing those applications regularly and quickly. In a competitive job market, you will lose folks quickly to whomever is going to be the quickest to respond. So you want to be sure that you're communicating promptly. Showcase your employer brand and value proposition, right? That's what's important to people today. We talked about that earlier. Engage your candidates in relative content and ideas. So this comes back to social media, right? So whatever your social media presence is, take a really deep look at what you're saying and who you're drawing. Who do you want to draw? Maybe you want to be versatile. Take a look at what your content says, because the first thing folks are going to do today is go to your social media pages and take a really close look at what you're saying, how you're saying it, and why you're saying it. And then solicit and act on candidate feedback. You can ask candidates, how was the onboarding process? How did it go? People may forget or they may miss the email, but you are going to get a certain percentage of responses. And it would be good to know, like, hey, my onboarding process was clunky. This is why. And you can look at that and go back and fix it. And then follow up and nurture your candidates. So there should be follow up and nurturing through the whole process. It is a competitive time. We have to do this. If we don't, we potentially can lose candidates. And that was a lot of what drew me in to my role currently. Is all of these things happened and there was a keen interest, right? And that interest was shown and there was constant communication. And it made you feel as though you were the candidate that they wanted. So what happens after you submit the application? Well, for me, some of the things I noticed, the waiting period was key. So, you get all excited about a role. Let's say you even had the phone call with, your CEO friend, you submit the application and you're just waiting, you're ready. Well, weeks go by and that waiting turns a little bit to resentment. You put in 2-3 hours to finish the application, no one has called you, you're ready to get back out there, you want to start getting engaged and working, but there's no movement on the other end. Meanwhile, your competitors are also contacting the candidate saying, hey, why don't you just come in here? We'll set you up really nice. This is what we're offering you. How can we outcompete? How can we offer you a better rate of pay? It's dangerous territory. we have got to get people's wait period down. We need to get to candidates right away. So quick responses are going to have the advantage. Always bearing in mind you're competing. And remember, whoever is in that HR office is extremely important. They have to have a love for people, they have to have the warmth, and they have to be competent. If they don't have those things, they're interacting with your potential candidates every day, and they may be turning them off. That whoever the human resources lead is, and the staff below them, they need to be on the ball, they need to be responsive, they need to make sure they're reaching out to candidates. These mistakes will cost the company talent. So we have to be sure we have the right people in the human resources office. So the interview. All right. So we submitted the application. Now we have our interview. What do we look for? Well, what I looked for is organization. So when we set up the time, it didn't get changed 3 times. You didn't have to constantly reschedule. When I arrived, you were expecting me, you were organized, everybody was ready to go. Those things all fell into place. There was a mutual respect for time. So, if I had to reschedule or you kept me waiting on something, you were respectful in that sense. I didn't show up for my interview and wait, an hour before you called me back. Or mutual respect for time, and vice versa. That's why it's mutual. I showed up on time, right? I had respect for your time as well. Warmth and authenticity. So if it's a cold place, probably not working there. If I sense that there's not an authentic demeanor, probably not going to be interested in working there. So authenticity for us is really, it's interesting. And what I mean by that is we have those deep senses, right? We have the ability to pick up on inauthenticity because we've spent so much time in the street in ambulances that it becomes more of a survival thing for us. So when someone's not telling us the truth, or there's more to the story, or someone's not being themselves, a first responder is going to pick up on it. And I think oftentimes we might forget that. So you cannot be inauthentic with your potential employees. It just doesn't work. It's going to turn them off. So just be yourself and be open and transparent about whatever is being asked. And then the interview question types. Were there thoughtful questions? Did they make sense? That is going to be really important. And again, your questions are going to come from your values and beliefs and vice versa. So when I'm answering these questions, I'm thinking about, oh, this is something that's important to this agency. This is why they're bringing it up. Well, that's important to me too, versus, oh, why are they asking this question? This isn't something that's really important, or it's just the response doesn't matter. Because there are interview questions out there that just aren't super great or don't make sense. Who is included in each stage of the interview? So typically there's more than one interview. If it's a quick and fast interview, probably a red flag. So if I walk in and walk out, unless we know each other, right? And you offer me a job right away, I'm definitely going to think twice about that. But also I'm looking for, did you include your staff members? Were there multiple members of management and potentially road employees in on that interview? I think that's important that they meet their coworkers, who they're going to be working with, and that their coworkers also choose them. So if I go on site for an interview, which I would insist on doing before you accept a job, by the way, but maybe the first interview is not on site and the second is. So when you go on site for an interview, what was I looking for? Well, I was looking at your ambulances and your stations to see if they were clean and they were in good shape. I was looking for the cleanliness and appearance of the staff. Were people showing up to work well groomed? Were their shirts tucked in, etc.? I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at the members of the management team as well. The condition of ambulances and equipment. So is there rust? What types of monitors do you use? What types of pumps do you have? Do you have state-of-the-art equipment? Power cot, hello, yeah, right? And then the demeanor of personnel and management. So when you walk the halls, are people laughing? Are they happy? Are they goofing off? Or does everybody look tired and fatigued and just kind of, not happy? What is the demeanor? Same thing for management. When they walk in, do they just look like they've just, been up for 24 hours? Or are the management team members relatively well rested and happy? All of those things are going to contribute to your opinion of what you're getting into, your thoughts about how you fit into the mold of that organization. So long waiting periods without communication, huge red flag. So if you put in an application and you're waiting months to hear back, I move on. I don't think about that organization at all. Again, the prompt response is really super great. You can get the conversation started right away. So here are a couple real onboarding experiences that I had. I interviewed at a company, got the job, and I went to orientation, and I was asked to drive a really long distance. And when I asked if I would be paid mileage, I was told no. So that for me was a huge red flag. I was also told that I wouldn't be paid for my time. So that led me to wanting to just call it at that point. That is a poor business practice. You are asking someone to come into work and do your orientation required to work. So therefore, they should be reimbursed for their drive and their time. I interviewed again for a position, a leadership position in another state at a certain point in my career, and I will never forget this. They booked my travel for me, which is fine, but they booked me 4 connectors. So to go to an interview that was a matter of 2, 3 hours, I ended up traveling for the entire day. I left in the morning and had to connect to 4 different flights to get to that agency. And when I was asked why there were so many connectors, I was told that they picked the cheapest option for flights, no matter what. I think that was a huge misstep. After being fatigued and then being expected to show up to the interview as soon as I landed, I was no longer interested. It just didn't feel right. I thought every time I travel or do anything, it's just going to be, we're going to be spending time over money. It didn't make sense to me. Low tier hotels. So if you're bringing someone in from the out of area, please put them in a clean, nice hotel. Because again, remember, you're putting your best foot forward. I've had a few experiences where I was placed in a low tier hotel, didn't have a great experience, didn't sleep well, and then came to an interview not as well rested as I wanted. It really creates this kind of negative feeling on the part of the candidate. If you're saving 20 or 30 bucks, it may not be worth it in the long run. An interrogation of relationship status. I had a very interesting experience where I went to an interview and they asked all the things, are you married? Are you single? Why not? I found it highly inappropriate. It's really none of anybody's business. So again, just a really strange experience, but things that really do happen out there. If you're ever asked about your relationship status in an interview, you really don't have to answer. It's just not part of the interview. And then another interesting experience I had, I was interviewing for a position, got the job, and I was brought in for the announcement. And they announced, hey, we want to bring you on board. Here's your salary. Here's all these things. And then the CEO actually brought out a really great bottle of whiskey and poured me a shot and said, this is part of what we do here. Here's your shot. And I was a little caught off guard. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy whiskey. I like enjoy having fun. It was definitely a fun way to do things, but I felt like in a workplace as a candidate, that was just a little off the mark. And the other thing was it ended with us going up to the cigar lounge within the agency. And again, on a personal level, I thought it was really, I thought it was cool, right? But I hadn't even signed my contract. It was just a little out of place. And again, you're kind of creating this weird, like, what if I didn't drink, right? And then I had to say, no, thank you. If I hate cigars, it's just awkward. This person didn't know any of these things about me and was kind of just presenting this other layer of what the agency was about. And I never forgot that. I didn't accept that role, and I'm thankful for that, but I will never forget it. And again, best intentions, right? They had the best intentions. So what are the interview red flags? Well, according to Harvard Business Review, I mentioned some of these already: rescheduling, disorganization, disrespect, we talked about, values conflict, we talked about, lack of clarity and consistency. So this is something I find just day to day that I think is interesting about folks. We want to believe what people say, but we really need to look at their actions. So if someone's telling you something when you're interviewing, but you see the complete opposite, just look a little bit closer. The bait and switch. Hey, I have this role. This is what it's going to be. And then you get into negotiations and you start looking over the contract, and the contract is not what the role was. So, red flag, get major clarity there, because you might get blindsided when you get inside and find out that you're in a role that wasn't advertised. Inappropriate questions or comments. We talked about that a little bit. A lack of connection. So you come in and you just don't feel it, right? That means that you're probably not destined to work there. We're all on a path, we're all on a journey. Your energy needs to match with their energy. So trust your gut there. If there's a lack of connection, it's probably not meant to be, regardless of the benefit package or whatever's offered. Resistance to change. You come in and you talk about change. I had an experience once where I interviewed for a management role, and it was quite some time ago, but I can't remember the details, but I remember telling this director, he was hiring for an assistant director, really wanted the role. Gosh, what did I say to him? I was dreaming big, and I said something like, I just want to go somewhere where I change the game. Like, we can be full staffed. These are the things we need to do. I really hope that I can, join this organization and bring these things to light. And I remember him looking at me, and clearly the guy had a really big ego, and I'd hurt his ego. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, yeah. Well, I've been trying that for 3 years and I failed. So I doubt you're going to be able to do it." And at that very moment, I knew that interview was over. And again, it was a blessing. That organization actually ended up closing and going under 2 years later. And his fate ended before that, actually. He was removed from the position. So, again, staying the path, right? That was not meant to be. Excessive interviews. So this is another one that I experienced really early on in my career when I was trying to get into management. I was interviewing for a role and I was working with a consultant. And so they had hired this consultant to do the interviews, and they put me through the interview process and liked me, but kept me in it for over a year. And I look back on that and I think, man, why didn't I just drop out? Like, they had no respect for me, right? But I really wanted to work for this person. They were involved in a lot of the leadership of our national organizations. They had a great reputation. And so they kept me in this loop for almost a year. And then eventually they offered me a job out of the blue, and they completely lowballed me. They gave me a salary that was less than a paramedic wage. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I stayed in this interview, and they created a position for me that didn't exist, that was like a secretary position. It was called something like administrative assistant. It's not what I wanted. I was very clear I wanted to be in operations. And so, of course, I didn't take the position, but they were deeply offended when I didn't, because I had stayed in for so long, and they just thought I was going to accept anything they gave me. By doing that, I was disrespecting myself, but they were disrespecting me. So don't let that go on. A long interview process like that means they're indecisive. They probably don't love you. They're just kind of, like on the fence about you. It's better to just call it at a certain point and walk away. And then job offers and ultimatums. If you get a job offer on a Friday and they're telling you, hey, you've got to make a decision by Monday, it's not super great. That means they're trying to put pressure on you. It could be an indicator that they're really short staffed and desperate, and they're trying to just get you in the door quickly. It's kind of psychologically, it's a scarcity mindset. Hey, if we don't catch them right away and get them to sign, they're going to walk away. It shouldn't be that way. They should give you the offer, let you have time to think about it. And remember, if you're not If you're hiring the right people and you're doing the right things, the right people are going to come to you. So if they've done all the right things and there's a connection there, you're going to go work for them. They don't need the ultimatum. So that scarcity mindset, red flag, definitely look closer at that. So the job offer comes, and what do you do before accepting that job offer? Well, here's what I do. I like to speak to current employees. So I may already know something about your organization, great, but I'm still going to make some phone calls. If I don't know a lot about your organization, I'm going to find someone that knows, right? And I'm just going to do my research. I am going to ask to jobs shadow and ride along. So the healthiest organizations I've worked in allow me to hang out for the day. I get to come in, I get to see what's going on. And again, you get to pick up on the energy. You get to see people really doing their work. It's going to tell you a lot. Connect with the person leaving the role. So, why did this person leave? Sometimes it's just, hey, I stopped earning or learning, right? That's fine. Everybody needs to go through different roles and progress in their career. They may have been very happy in that role, but you want to understand if there's a high turnover rate, especially, why are folks leaving? What are you getting into? What's been their experience? Sometimes that can be a little tricky, and I understand that. And sometimes you won't get the opportunity, but if you do have the opportunity, go for it. Always negotiate. You might not get what you want, but you should always negotiate. You can always get better terms. You can always get better pay. I understand there's limitations, but whatever you can negotiate, you should. Because if you get the rate of pay that you want, you're more likely to stay longer term. And it's not only good for you, it's good for the employer. Employers want you to stay. And then contact HR to review pay and benefits. Just be very clear. What am I being paid? What are my benefits? How does my retirement work? How does my wellness program work? How do these things work? How can I comp PTO if you can do that? Understand all the nuances. That way you're well versed and you know what you're getting into. You're not surprised after you sign. So I have to talk briefly about new hire onboarding because it's so important. So the hiring process does not end after you sign the contract. And one of the things we forget is our new employee onboarding process is really important. Folks will resign within this process. I have friends that have done it. I've had colleagues that have done it. If they get into your organization, maybe they had a good experience in their interview and then they get inside and it's a mess, they're going to scoot. Because remember, they still have the other offers that maybe they haven't even gotten back to yet or they can go back to. So you need to have a great new hire orientation and training program. So in a competitive market, it must be scheduled very soon after the offer of employment. So when you're shuttling folks in, you have a hiring spree, you cannot leave folks for 30 days waiting to start work. People need to earn money, right? And so what you might find is you hire somebody and you have this really long phase where they can't train. That's a problem. They could walk away from you at that point and just go to the next place. And it's also putting them in a financial position potentially where they're strapped. So that new employee orientation needs to start as soon as possible, and syncing up when you interview and hire with new employee orientation is so important. The first day is everything. So leadership is showing up neat, groomed, tucked in. They're setting the example. Their behavior sets the example. There's no F-bombs on the first day. There's no inappropriateness. It is professionalism. It's warmth. It's fun. It's all of those things. So they understand when I come here, this is what's expected of me. If an employee walks in on their first day and their shirt's untucked, we're immediately telling them to tuck their shirt in. If they're not in uniform because they're expected to be, they should be. Those expectations are followed from day one. A poor experience within the organization this early, though, is going to lead to some really negative effects. If you set the bar low, it's going to be set when they go into operations and they go out into the field. That's just the way it is, right? And we could even attribute this back to the education department. If the education department is internal and you raise that employee, they're going to take those habits and bring them into the operation. So with new employee orientation, it's really important to give a really great first impression to these employees coming to you. And if you're going to invest, you want to invest heavily into recruiting, new hire, and onboarding. Because if you get those things right, operations day to day often is, it's a humdrum, it's a repetitive cycle. And sure, we need to have that right, but oftentimes that's right. It's the new employee orientation and the onboarding that's really bumpy. So the two bleed together. We need to have two systems that work really, really well together, and people are coming in and their expectation and their clarity is elevated. They know exactly what they should be doing. So I again, I attached another good resource from SHRM, and SHRM is always a good foundation to go to. But when you bring people in, you select wisely, and then you work on these areas, right? Self-efficacy. Are their skills good? Do they need a skill refresher? Do they understand what they're doing? Do they understand their role within the company? An EMT at one place may function differently than an EMT at another. Very clear roles. If they need to do new employee onboarding trainings, making that extremely clear. What do they need to do? Where do they need to go? How do they get it done? And then socially integrating them. So, are they being exposed to great FTOs that are making them feel at home, that are supporting their needs? Having a negative FTO that's passive aggressive or dysfunctional will ruin that employee right off the bat. They'll either take those characteristics and attribute them to themselves to fit in, or there'll be conflict. And then, do they understand the culture? What's your mission statement? What's your value statement? Do you live it? What's expected when you come to work? Those things are important. Those will all lead to successful onboarding. So this is actually linked, and there's a full guide connected to it with much deeper reading on these different areas. So if you're interested, you can definitely click the link to get to the SHRM resource. And I realize I'm almost out of time here, so we're getting close to the end, but I wanted to include this National Registry of EMT study. There's a lot of negative talk in the industry about how we're losing our employees and turnover is high. Yeah, it's somewhat high. It could be better. But what the study showed is that we are having a 30% increase in workforce. So people are coming in, and our goal should be to foster those people coming in and retain them. Sure, we can lower our turnover rate, but the two really go together, right? So good news is we have increased our workforce, and as you know, our call volume is projected to continue to increase. So we need to continue to add folks to the workforce while potentially retaining talent. So, considerations for retention. Well, what does the recruited say to the recruiter? What we once wanted is not what they want. So, I'm reminded of this every day in my role. What I wanted at work is not necessarily what those up and coming want. We have to ask people what they want and try to give them what they want. And we need to do this without abandoning an expectation or abandoning accountability. Hiring the wrong person definitely can destroy your team. Hire smart and fire fast, in my opinion. Do not extend a investigation or letting somebody go because you feel bad. If it truly is negatively impacting the organization and there is a clear evidence that they're not contributing, you have to fire fast. Otherwise, that negativity and that culture is going to start spreading, and it's going to spread quick. Watch the canaries. You all have canaries within your organization that are deeply committed to your organization. They've likely been there for a number of years. They know and see all of the history. They understand how things ebb and flow. And when you get into a cycle where you have really big problems, your canaries are going to be the first to leave. They will not put up with value misalignment and disrespect. Measure your turnover and presenteeism. You can measure how engaged your staff is. We should be tracking how many people we're onboarding and how many people we're losing, and understand the cost of turnover. Turnover can be extravagantly expensive depending on how you have things set up. anywhere from $10,000 per person to $70,000 per person. It also depends on how far they get within the organization. So, any questions? Thank you so much for having me today. I will open the floor. See if I can click on this. Yeah, absolutely. So it appears that some of the content on the PDF slides is cut off, and I cannot access the links. Could you perhaps email them? Yeah, the links won't be clickable until you get the slides. I believe Amanda said the American Ambulance Association is emailing out these slides. Questions? I'm just seeing all the comments. Yeah, thanks. Oh, thank you. Oh, I see Scott Moore was on. Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining. Thanks, John. I'm glad you enjoyed it. What kind of social media post made you want to apply? Oh, okay. So I'm biased here, but my current employer has a video that's incredible. It's professionally done, it's inspiring. Everybody is in uniform and they are all the way up from management to employees. So you have a lot of diversity in there, and they're basically talking about why they love working where we work. So I really loved that. That was one of the things that really drew me in. Um, so that's one example of what I enjoy. I have seen some content out there that's really great, that's real time. I understand that a lot of agencies hesitate to put real time footage up, but I do really enjoy it. So just breaking out your phone one day and you're in a truck and you get a call and somebody's talking about something meaningful, or seeing people in action, I think could really inspire some of the generations up and coming to get into the field. So I like that type of footage when I see it out there. I think that's really great to put on social media. It needs to be real, it needs to be authentic. Those things are really important. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate it. How long do you think the hiring process should be for non-management positions? I guess my question there is, do you mean orientation as well? Because if you include orientation, not a one-stop answer. So what I mean by that is, if you have somebody come in that's experienced, I really truly believe they could get cleared within 3 months to work on their own, if they're really experienced, right? Because really what they're learning is the ins and outs of your operation, your service area potentially, so routing, those types of things. If it's a newer employee, the high quality in me wants to say about 6 months, but that really depends, again, on how your operation is structured, your size, those types of things I think will influence that. But yeah, 3 to 6 months roughly. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nikki. I'm glad you got something out of it. I'm glad you enjoyed the content. Nita, are there many? Yes, we are a very private state. Lots of privates here. and municipal, but mainly privates. When it comes to at least geography here, the privates cover more geography typically than the municipal agencies do. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Is anybody on the other end? I don't know if you want me to hang out or not. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have my email? You can just shoot me an email. I'd love to chat. Actually, type it in the chat box just in case you don't have it. Yeah, let's connect. I'd love to just chat. Here's my email. Yeah, absolutely. So I am curious about the timeline from interview to receiving an offer. I know you said you are not an advocate of same-day offers. I'm wondering why. For us, it is less of a scarcity mindset and more why not offer a good candidate the position when there are several. That's a good point. So let me clarify that one, Sarah. So what I meant to say, and I may have just poorly communicated it, is one interview, same day offer. So if you're doing multiple interviews and I'm on the second or third interview and I've met, my coworkers, I've met the leadership team, we've had a couple conversations and I leave with an offer, that's great. But what I was really referring to was, you bring me in, we have a really quick chat. I may or may not meet some of your employees and you offer me the job then. Not a fan of that. So yeah, and then the interview to receiving an offer, sure. So, yeah, short time frame, but it's the one interview offer that makes me uncomfortable. You. Good question. Any other questions? What are your thoughts on entrance exams? Okay, so what are your thoughts on entrance exams prior to an interview with questions about character as well as clinical treatments and such? So Tony, if you mean entrance exams like for clinical knowledge or a combination, I have mixed feelings about that. So it really depends on your culture. So if you're a culture of, this is our expectation, we really want to see who you are before you get in here, I say go for it. My advice, though, is to make it an efficient exam. So don't make it a long exam because remember, during the application process, if they're not being paid, some folks are just going to be adverse to doing that, and rightfully so. And the other thing is, at least this is my experience, is I find that the younger generations want it quick, right? They want to just get in and you're competing. So if you give someone a 50-question exam and they're talking to 4 other agencies and it's all going well, you could lose a candidate to that. So it really depends on your expectation of having them come in. If you feel that that's important, I think that's great. The upside to that is you're going to know a lot more about that person based on whether or not they were willing to do the exam and the answers they provided in the exam. So you're more likely to hire the right person and you're less likely to have a value misalignment. On the flip side, in a competitive market, people might be scattered. They might just go with what's easy. They're going to have to be compensated in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, you might find people adverse. So there's those aspects of where you could potentially lose out. I know if I'm going to someone high quality and they have a great reputation and they give me, a 25-question exam or a few short answer questions, yeah, I'm going to answer the questions because I want to work there. But that's me. I don't know that everybody's that way. You're welcome. Glad you enjoyed it. Other questions? I'm here for it. Oh, hey, Tim. Thank you. I'm going to have to catch up soon. Thanks, everybody.